Linda, hello. I am so happy to have you on the podcast. And I am sitting here with a copy of your book, which is incredible to see it come to life. I know you and I have been connecting behind the scenes for some time through the writing process, and seeing it come to life and actually reading it resonated so much with me. So I can't wait to dive into all of that. So happy you're here.
Oh, thank you so much, Irina. Thank you so much for having me, for setting this up, for having this conversation. And I'm much more excited to hear about what you thought of the book. I know you're going to be
Yeah.
asking me a lot of questions, but yeah, thank you for having me.
So, of course, I know who you are, and millions of people know who you are through your YouTube channel. But tell us a bit about you before we hop in.
Yes. Well, okay. How much time do we have? Yeah. So when people ask me that, it's like, okay, do I go all the way back? But essentially, well, I'll share what I do right now. So I'm an author of the book, The Quiet Achiever, which just launched October of 2025. This book has now become an Amazon bestseller in Canada, the US, and Singapore as well. And I am a speaker. I'm also a leadership and communication coach. So essentially, I work with a specific group of individuals, professionals who I call quiet achievers. Those of us who are introverted, we keep to ourselves. We, at the same time, however, are high achievers. We're hard workers. We have goals, we have dreams. And I work with these individuals in helping them to elevate and enhance their communication and their confidence in their careers so that whether it's to advance to the next level or to pursue a different career path, whatever it is that they want, it's to help them get to that level. I mean, that's the work that I do now. Previously, people would recognize me and know me as Linda Raynier, the career strategist. That's very similar to Irina, helps you to land job offers in your career. And that's essentially how people would know me if they watched my YouTube videos over the last 10 years. But my work has since then pivoted with the help of the Quiet Achiever being my new message.
I love that. And you know what? The Quiet Achiever group that you just described is probably the group that needs the most support in getting their voices heard in the workplace, right? Getting promoted, landing that role, such an important message. And oddly enough, when I first heard the title and, we talked about it and you explained it, I thought, okay, I know I'm an achiever. That's for sure. It's one of my top strengths. If you've done that top strengths assessment by Gallup,
Right.
and I identify with that word so much, but I thought, you know what? I'm not that quiet. This probably isn't for me. Reading it though, I was so surprised. It all resonated, all of it. And I think the piece about being introverted and how that affects our energy and how that affects the way in which we show up in all aspects of our lives. It's such a beautiful message. Really, really resonated with me. How do you think, from your perspective, that quiet achievers are impacted at work? How does this affect their ability to sell themselves, whether that's in an interview or just, in their jobs?
I love that. Well, I think we kind of have to take it back to understanding how quiet achievers sort of function and think, because I didn't know this group of individuals existed until I had to do my own self inner reflection and realize, oh, I'm also a quiet achiever. A lot of the clients that came to me when they were looking for jobs, I noticed they were very similar in the sense that they were all hard workers. They were delivering good quality work, reports, whatever it is that they were responsible for at work. But they were not able to, like you said, sell themselves or communicate their value. And so I had to teach them, those techniques when it comes to interviewing. But what then I noticed afterward was these individuals would land the jobs, and then now that they're in the job, it became a whole other ballgame where on a daily basis, they were doing their work, working hard, delivering, always being on time, all the things, all the wonderful things that you look for in a hard worker, a good employee. But over the course of several years, especially when they would advance to maybe senior, then they get to mid-manager level, was where I noticed a lot of these quiet achievers stagnated career-wise. They weren't able to get to that senior manager, that director level. I learned, and now, those clients, after being in this industry and this business for 10 years, they've come back to me asking me, Linda, can you share with me or teach me how to communicate in a way where I can advance to the next level, that was what I discovered sort of is that pain point for these quiet achievers, is that they're in this place where they're getting these reviews performance wise, being told you need to speak up more. You need to put yourself out there more. You need to share your ideas more. We need to hear of your voice more. And so in the workplace, not knowing how to do these things, because this is the thing, is a lot of quiet achievers, the ones that I work with at least, they were programmed, just as I was, with this very specific idea of just put your head down, work hard, get good grades, get a good job, you'll live happily ever after. Don't worry about once you get the job. You'll be happy once you get the job. And then they've followed that path. They've progressed. They've gained a certain level of success. But now they're at that point where, well, now what? I'm not feeling successful. I also don't feel very confident in myself, other than when I produce good work, that represents my value. So they fully identify with their job, their work, the value that they bring in terms of the quality of their work, but their voices are stifled. Their voices aren't able to be expressed clearly. They're not able to share their opinions. A lot of my quiet achiever clients, they struggle with anxiety when it comes to, for example, even just speaking up in a meeting. And that, as you being a director in HR, I'm sure you're very familiar with that, over time holds you back. If people feel that you're invisible and they don't recognize you, they don't see you, you're not going to get those opportunities.
A thousand
So
percent.
yeah.
1,000%. And it's like, especially at that leadership level, like you mentioned, people value those typical leadership skills, which people can see as very extroverted type skills, right? It's not enough to just put your head down, do the project in the best way possible. Now it's important to lead and move others and get people aligned with your vision and share that passion and be your own best advocate. Because if we're not doing that for ourselves, no one is coming to save us, right? No one's going to do that for us. What would be like one tip that you can share for people that are resonating with this message where they're like, okay, I also want to move to that director level now. I also want to be a leader, a first time leader, but it doesn't come naturally to me. And I want to make sure that I do that. That's very important in my career. I know you gave a ton of incredible insights through your books. I know people could read that and take so much away, but what would be like the number one thing that comes to mind?
Oh, because I'm someone that goes deep. It's not just the tactics. Like I could easily tell you, oh, well, you just need to speak up more in meetings. You need to share your opinions. You need to have a structure on how you're going to share it. Like, blah, blah, blah. We can get into that, sure. But what I know to be true is that when it comes to communication, it goes beyond the words that come out of your mouth. It goes beyond the structure of the sentences, how you put phrases together. It goes well beyond that. It's much deeper than that. It actually comes down to how you feel about yourself, what you say to yourself at a subconscious level, and what you believe about yourself. That then determines how calm and comfortable and confident you sound when you're speaking, and how much conviction you have in your voice when you're speaking. And so if I was to, get people down to the root of it, it would be, you need to be honest with yourself and ask yourself, what am I so afraid of? What is causing me to feel this anxiety? Why am I struggling to share my opinions? What do I think is the worst thing that will happen to me? It really is about asking the questions to dig up the treasure, which is the root core belief. And I talk a lot about this in The Quiet Achiever. It's getting to the root of the belief, because once you acknowledge the belief, what you believe about yourself, all of a sudden, because it's now acknowledged, it dissipates in its power. It's almost as if a fear-based belief in my mind is like a crying baby. A baby that's crying, what are you going to do? You're going to pick up the baby, you're going to soothe the baby, hug the baby, feed the baby, change the baby, and then eventually the baby will calm down. That is the exact same thing as how fear-based beliefs operate, because they're crying. They're wanting your attention. They want you to acknowledge them because they don't want to have to keep crying. And so if you can just dig deep and ask yourself, what is the root of my anxiety when it comes to speaking up at work or sharing my ideas? What is the root of it? Generally, it has something to do with, I feel like I don't belong here. I feel as though my ideas are unworthy. I feel as I'm unworthy. It comes down to something that is so, I can't explain other than just saying that is so deep that it needs to be explored, because the more that we're willing to look inward, which is the message of the quiet achiever, the more that we can then release what doesn't belong to us. And then we're able to then feel much more at ease. We are able to lighten up. And that's when communication feels much more fluid. We're able to make connections with people in a more genuine way. We're able to be ourselves, our authentic selves, and show up as that version of ourselves, which is the version that will then get the recognition and the opportunities that we're looking for.
1000%. If we don't believe we are the best candidate for that promotion, for that director role, if it doesn't start with us, how will we ever convince anyone else to see that in us? So, the journaling prompts that you have inside the Quiet Achiever, I love journaling. You probably know that. I know a lot of people listening as well. All the time. They love all the journaling prompts. And there's so many in this book to go deeper because you're right. It's not a quick Band-Aid fix. If you just tell yourself, oh, at Wednesday's meeting, I'm going to speak up that time. That doesn't actually address a root issue and the fear. So I love that. I love that so much. I'm going to go in a little different direction. Something that really resonated with me in the book is your story of being a refugee and being an immigrant to Canada and how that shaped who you are and your story, how your upbringing really affected the fact that you are a quiet achiever and that had a huge impact on your life. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that. How do you think that shaped who you are today?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to get a little nuance is that I was born here in Canada, in Toronto, born and raised, but my parents were refugees from Vietnam. So
It did
they,
say the 80s, and I'm like, Linda, we're almost the same age. There's no way she could have come here in the 80s. Okay, so that makes a lot.
oh, yes. No, no, no. Yeah, I was born here, and my parents came here in the early 80s as refugees. So after the Vietnam War, what had happened was, just like in the US, they were taking people, bringing people over, Canada, US, Australia, and my parents, luckily, Canada had accepted them and said, yes, come on over, opened their doors, and that's how, they had me, they had my younger sister. Now, the reason why I mention that as part of my story is because it really does play a key role in my upbringing, in the sense that I was not raised by quote unquote, sort of typical Canadian parents, in a sense, who were born and raised here themselves. My parents were from Vietnam, a country that had just been sort of war torn and whatnot, and third world country. And then previous to that, my grandparents. So I actually come from a long line in terms of generations of people that have fled countries due to wars and had to start over. So my great grandparents were from China. They fled China because famine, war, all of that was going on back then. And then they went to Cambodia, actually. And that's because a lot of Chinese people moved to Cambodia and Southeast Asian countries just because of, at that time, there was more opportunity to do business. So they moved to Cambodia. That's where my parents were born. Due to Pol Pot, the war that then happened during that time, they had to flee. My grandparents and my parents had to flee. They came to Vietnam. And then my parents eventually fled Vietnam after the war. So it's just a long line of lots of trauma, lots of, I'm sure, anxiety and fear that I think almost energetically has been passed down. And now, me growing up in a safe and secure country, Canada, I feel as though it did play a role in how I saw the world, in terms of how my parents saw the world and what they taught me. And so quiet achievers, what I've discovered is many quiet achievers are either children of immigrants or
Mhm.
immigrants themselves. And it is because of the non-Western culture in how we are raised in Eastern or South Asian culture, or basically anything that's not Western, where the idea is put your head down, don't speak out of line, work hard, let your work speak for itself, don't show off, don't brag about yourself. All of these little things that you would think as a child, you're just being taught these because that's just what polite is. But we carry that. We've carried that. Quiet achievers have this programming deep within ourselves, and we've carried that forward up through school, where it actually worked for us. We studied hard, we got good grades, we were the A students. We went to university, got the good jobs after university, worked those jobs, and then at a certain level in our careers, as adults, where our brains are now fully functioning and fully developed, we've realized, hold on, what I've been fed, this idea of what success looks like, this idea of what I would feel like if I was successful, why does it not resonate with me anymore? So our identities have shifted. Now I feel as many quiet achievers after you've reached a certain level of success. That makes sense. I feel like I was a little bit
A
choppy in how I
thousand
described.
percent. That is loud and clear to me. I mean, I'm also a refugee. I come from immigrant parents. And I know in the book you talked about in your upbringing, what was acceptable was like, okay, become a doctor or a lawyer or maybe an accountant, like the first path that you down. And my advice, but the first advice I got from my dad was, coming again from his fears and from his we left a war-torn country as well. There were literally bombs dropping when we came to Canada, and that was how I came to Canada from Israel. And we left Russia also due to opportunity, like you mentioned. But his biggest advice to me when I was trying to pick a program in university was like, just get yourself a job in an air-conditioned office. Right? Like, work hard, just sit there. He's like, that seems like a dream. They'll just pay you to sit in an air conditioned office. And to him, that was
Love
like
that.
mind blowing because he has worked so hard, very manually, right? So, if upbringing really does shape, especially the first career decisions we make before we maybe know our authentic selves in a deeper way. Because what do we really know about ourselves in our 20s? Not as much, right? So I love what you said about people reaching this pivotal point in their career and thinking, is this it? Now what? And I want something more. Discovering that through, I know you talk about purpose and alignment in the Quiet Achiever as well, which is so, so helpful. I love that. So I want to switch directions again, selfishly. I want to talk about your writing process. And I want to hear, I know this is like a top question. As soon as I share with someone that I'm writing a book, they're like, what is it like? What do you actually do? How do you do it? So I'd love to hear, first of all, how did the Quiet Achiever come about? What made you decide that this was the next chapter of your career?
Oh, this is a big one. Okay, that's a great question. So, in terms of the book, so when I initially got the book deal, and there's a whole story behind how that happened, but when I got the book deal, I initially believed that I was going to write a book about helping my clients to get promoted. Because I thought at the time, and this was back in 2023, I was feeling as though, I didn't want to write about getting a job because I've done that, been there, done that. I wanted to write something slightly different. And I thought, okay, if I write about helping people to get promoted, that would help me to talk about something a little bit more exciting, a little bit more challenging for me, something that I want to stretch into. And as I wrote that version of the book, I wrote about 5 chapters and I realized I have nothing left to say. I wrote about 5 chapters. It was very clear, okay, this is the path to promotion, but it also felt a little hollow because I had followed a certain formula that I thought this would be the answer. There was something within me that was stirring within me as I was writing. It almost felt as though that first round of writing those first 5 chapters, it was just to get my juices flowing. It was just to get me into the flow of writing and getting my ideas down onto my laptop. Because what ended up happening was by the end of those 5 chapters, I was told that I had to write at least 10. So I was like, I don't have any other things to write about. So that was when I realized I needed to shift the direction. And so I went inward and I started asking myself, well, what does my heart actually want to write? Because at this point, it was no longer about just getting ideas down. It was more about wanting to really express my authentic voice in the words that I was writing. And I kept getting this feeling that, well, one example was I had gone to a CPA event where I was a speaker at the CN Tower for prospective CPA students because I'm a CPA myself. So the CPA Ontario asks me occasionally to come speak to their members. And I did a 10-minute spiel sharing about my journey being a CPA. And we talked, you had mentioned my accounting path, which is the original path that I took in my career, and how I pivoted since then to now do the work that I do. And it was in the conversations after that 10-minute talk where people were coming up to me and sharing with me how that little piece of my story that I kind of brushed over, where I had to turn inward and ask myself, what do I really want? What is the ideal thing that I really want to do? They were wanting to hear more about that. And that was when I realized, wow, so many people are feeling stuck So many people are feeling lost or feeling confused. And to be honest with you, Irina, the world of work is changing so quickly with AI, with everything that's going on. People aren't as excited and identified with that old version of what success looks like, that traditional path anymore. People want to know, what else can I do with my degree, or what else can I do being who I am? How can I be my authentic self and have a career that I'm happy with? And so that was when I realized, okay, that's the direction I need to go with this book. It needs to be about helping people to feel unstuck. It needs to be about helping people to gain clarity in who they are beyond what they were told and programmed to believe a successful career needs to look like. It had to be about them going inward, because that's the journey that I've had to go through multiple times. And I'm still on this journey. I think it'll always be the case that I'm looking inward, asking myself the hard questions. What do I really want? Where do I really want to go with my life and my career? How can I express that highest, most authentic version of myself in everything that I do and everything that I put out there in the world? And so that became the premise of the book. And to be honest with you, when it came to writing, it actually flowed so much more easily than the first round of those 5 chapters about getting a promotion, because now it was just coming through me. It was coming from within me. It felt as though sentences, ideas and concepts, they just pieced themselves together in a way. And so,
I
yeah,
love
that.
that. So there's a couple things you said. You took cues from that day at the CN Tower and that moment where people are resonating with something you mentioned and they want you to go deeper on that. And you're talking about really this collective awakening that sort of has happened since 2020, right? A lot of people are not okay with, we talked about our parents' generation where they're like, work in the air conditioned office or get that good job and just keep your head down. Where now people are like, okay, but that's not enough for me anymore. Now I'm seeking more purpose and more alignment to who I truly am and who am I? And like that discovery process, I find that, and I think that's why the book really resonated with me. That is so interesting to me, not only me, obviously the people you spoke to. And I'm so glad that you listened to your intuition. I know we talked before we went to lunch at Yorkdale. If you guys live in Toronto, there's a beautiful restaurant there, the RH Cafe. And we were sitting down, we were talking about one of your gifts, which is listening to your intuition. And I know there's a chapter on intuition as well in the book. And that's something you really do naturally. And I think that comes from being a quiet achiever, someone who's reflective and like looks inside, and you're teaching others to do that. And I love that in your career, you've had many pivots. Like you went from the CPA to the recruiter to the podcaster to the career coach, now author. And each time, did you listen to your intuition each time you made pivot? Because these are big changes, right? In career,
Yes.
many people just stay on the same path. I mean, I stayed in HR for 15 years on the same path, and I regret not pivoting sooner into what I'm doing today because this is truly my calling. Are you getting better at that, or is this something that has just always been a natural gift and something you've always done with each pivot?
I love how you asked that. Yes, when it comes to intuition, and yes, I wrote a whole chapter on it because I genuinely believe that is the key to unlocking and gaining clarity and direction as to where you want to go with your life, with your career. If you're feeling stuck, is to learning how to tune inwards and trusting what comes to you internally. It's your heart speaking to you. So intuition has been something that I've always been aware, that I've always known that I was sensitive. Let's just put it that way. Growing up, I didn't have anyone around me that helped me to nurture that intuition. I just always felt as though I could sense when someone was speaking, I could feel what they were feeling. I know that's a weird way to put it. They could say certain things, but I could read between the lines and actually understand and get a sense as to what they're really feeling behind their words. That was a memory from growing up as a teenager and into my 20s. I could do that. But I never really nurtured it or knew that that was even part of my abilities. And that's called being an empath. Ultimately, it's only been within the last 5 years, I'd say, where, well, now I'd say that that's not true. The last 10 years, my intuition has really heightened, and it sparked when 10 years ago, I had resigned my corporate recruiter job. And I said, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to figure it out. And I ended up pursuing a yoga teacher training sort of certification because I was a little bit lost and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I thought, might as well go do yoga every weekend for the next 3 months and let's just learn that. And I didn't want to teach yoga. I knew that, but I knew that it was going to do something for me. And that was the intuition speaking. Just take this program. It was flashing before me. I kept getting emails about it and I just kept getting pulled to do it. I did the yoga teacher training. It was wonderful. I knew that I wasn't going to be a teacher out of it. However, what I learned in the yoga teacher training, what we were forced to do was to get quiet with ourselves, to learn how to meditate. It wasn't just the stretching and the yoga moves. It was about meditation. And I started meditating on a regular basis because I had the time to at that point after having quit my job and no kids. And so, it was a wonderful life for that time period where in the sense I didn't have anybody else to worry about. And that literally cracked open something within me where I started, my sensitivities heightened. We don't have to get into that because then it gets into a whole bunch of other crazy stories, but I
Yeah,
just
I know it
started.
gets a little woo-woo, which I love, but that we can save that for
Yeah.
the next one.
Right. Yeah. So we could talk about that for another episode. But essentially, I started sensing, getting a lot more intuitive hints. And one thing that kept coming to me as I would meditate was I would ask, okay, what am I to do? Because at that point, I hadn't started my channel, my YouTube channel. I hadn't started my business. And I kept getting a vision of me, just like I am right now, sitting in front of a camera, talking into the camera, and then putting those videos onto YouTube. So I kept seeing that as like a consistent sign, a consistent message. So eventually, 6 months after doing the yoga and meditating and trying to figure it all out, I just started taking action. I did that. And by the third or fourth video, one of my top performing videos called Tell Me About Yourself, how to answer that interview question, it went viral and it basically established and created my business for me. I started offering courses and coaching and just this whole slew of clients were coming in and I rode that wave for years. And since then, having started the YouTube channel, building that business, yes, I've had to continuously make pivots because my intuition keeps leading me to a new path. And the biggest one since then has been writing this book. The book itself is a whole also intuitive thing. I saw it, I had a dream. I saw the book floating literally above my bed. And it showed that it was written by me, by Linda Raynier, and I took that as a sign. So for 3 months after having that dream, this was back in 2023, I dove deep into research, identified how do you write a book? How do you get a publisher? How do you do all these things? And I didn't know what to do with that information. All I did was do the research and figured out what book I would write. And then within a couple of weeks after I had started to kind of shelve it, the idea of writing a book, I got a call from Wiley, an email specifically from Wiley, the publisher of The Quiet Achiever, asking me, Linda, have you ever thought of writing a book? Because if you have, we'd love to publish it. And so it's just, my intuition has guided me this entire journey. And it's really about being open to the signs, the inklings, the hunches. It could be something as crazy as a dream, or it could just be a feeling. And that's what I really want people to learn to really nurture, is that inner voice. Because if you don't nurture your inner voice and you don't listen to yourself, what's going to happen is that you're going to continuously lean on other people. You're going to be looking outside of yourself for guidance, looking to other people's ideas. And they're not there to truly guide you because they haven't walked the path that you're currently walking necessarily. You have to tune inwards to yourself. That's when the ideas, the opportunities, the people, the right ones that you're meant to meet will come along.
Yes.
That's what
The most aligned path. Yes. And I love that you shared those stories because your yoga experience, although wasn't a huge chapter in your career in terms of like, that's not the business you ended up starting or anything like that, but it was pivotal in you getting quiet and meditating and breathing. And I think that allowed for you to be able to listen to what was inside intuitively guiding you, which we are the people that know what we are meant to be doing above everyone else. Like we can ask everyone for advice. I recently had another coach come to me and he's like, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, like get quiet, start to meditate. And that really, really resonates with me because during my spiritual awakening, I know cancer has touched your life and in a different way that it's touched my life, but we share that in common. But that experience also brought me to meditate and to listen. And that was the first time I really trusted my intuition And then I started seeing visions like you talked about as well, and things coming through so much clearly. And now I feel like I am in my most aligned path. So it's incredible when we go searching for answers by asking other people, that doesn't get us very far, right? To who we truly authentically are, because no one can answer that for us except us, but it does take getting quiet and meditating. So that's beautiful. I'd love to know if had cancer touch your family's life as well. And when I started reading the book, I know I texted you and I was like, I'm so happy you shared this chapter so early on in the book, because I know there are very little people that have not been touched by cancer. It unfortunately is somehow something that is prevalent in everyone's life, but it touched your life very specifically. I'd love to know how your husband's journey and his fight with cancer has impacted you, your career, your mission.
Yes, I can say that his journey with cancer and our family having to obviously be very heavily involved in helping him through that healing journey over the last few years, it actually has now formed the foundation of how I view my work, how I run my life, and the priorities that I have and that I live by. And so what I mean by this is, up until my husband getting diagnosed, now what was it, 2.5 years ago, with stage 4 cancer, that doctors, honestly, they had very little hope that he would make it beyond even a few months at that point, because it was, and he's now deemed a miracle, an exceptional case is what they call him in the medical world. An exceptional case, not necessarily, they don't use the word miracle. But leading up to that point, we were both, to everyone else, the power couple. I was running this very successful career coaching business. He was in his corporate job as a director at a major bank, one of the big banks in Canada. And we were both living this life of success, what success looks like to most people: fancy dinners, fancy vacations, beautiful homes, blah, 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 blah. But underneath the surface, though, we were constantly on this path of achieving, 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 which is why being a high achiever has its pros, but then to the extreme, it has its pitfalls, because then you identify with your value and your worth in only what you are able to achieve, acquire, obtain. And when this happened, all of that came crashing down. We had to really reevaluate, who are we beneath our achievements, beneath the way that we've been living our life. What were we really running towards, or what were we trying to go after? Because what really matters now and then is what we realize is that all that matters is that we feel at ease within ourselves. We feel peaceful. We feel healthy. We are living simply in a way where we're not looking to others to appease others, to prove ourselves to others. We're not doing anything for anyone else. It really just matters how we feel within ourselves. And then, of course, we can still be good people and do good things for other people, but it's not about, this is about being selfish in a good way, in a way that preserves our energy and our well-being. And so in terms of now, how it continues to be the foundation as to, like I said, how I view my work, how I run my life, and the decisions that I make. And recently, as you're bringing this up, I've had to make some decisions, even just with how things have gone with this book launch. I mean, it's been 5 months of intensity launching this book. It has created a lot of stress. It created a lot of stress during the last 5 months. It was insane. I did not anticipate that it would have that much of an impact on my body. And so that was a bit of a wake-up call for the both of us, because Matt, my husband, he was helping me in behind the scenes. He was also affected by it. And we're now looking to next year, 2026, in a new way. We're not going to be running on that hamster wheel all over again. And it's not, I wouldn't call it a mistake that we did what we did. I actually think it was exactly what it needed to be. But now we can incorporate more of those priorities that we have for ourselves, which is to ensure that we feel at peace, we feel at ease, that we're not chasing something, we're not running behind the 8 ball constantly, we're not highly stressed and anxious. We need to intentionally implement things that would allow for that peace to be there consistently. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know.
What a
Kind of took a
beautiful
long roundabout way.
lesson. No, I'm glad you shared that story. I'm so happy to hear that he's healthy. And it is a true miracle to go from stage 4 to perfect health. And it's beautiful that you took a really powerful lesson from something dark and probably the hardest moments of your life. And I think that's really beautiful because I really resonate with that. I always say that the cancer was like the catalyst. It was my biggest teacher, and I'm so happy that it happened. Not in the moment, of course, that was
Yeah.
very challenging. But now looking back, it taught me lessons that I may not have learned throughout the course of my whole life. It made me change my whole life, right? So I love so that realizing how our days are numbered. They truly are. And then it makes you really evaluate what the most important thing is. And for everyone, the most important thing is not that next house, that flashy car, right? Just like you said, it's peace and happiness. And if
Yeah.
you don't have health, then you don't have anything, right? So
Yeah.
these three things are at the end of the day what I think we're all seeking. We just want peace and happiness, right? And the way sometimes we go in which, like, go to try to attain that is through the other material possessions, which I have learned are very short. They're fleeting, kind of. It's like that dopamine hit of like, freaking amazing. Got that new house, got that new car. That feels so good. I'm grateful. Thank you, universe. But also, that's not what really brings the peace and the happiness and that. So beautiful. And if someone else is listening to this that is also going through a big challenge right now, they're going through, you know, mentioned the challenges of launching the book for the last 5 months. I can imagine you're very out of your comfort zone with all of the beautiful, big, shiny events and all of the publicity and all the exciting things happening. But I know as a quiet achiever, you also need that balance, that rest. What would you tell someone who might be going through a challenge right now, whether it's as big as cancer or something just like finding it difficult to find their next opportunity and not feeling fulfilled in what they're doing? What message do you hope that the quiet achiever leaves them with?
I think the biggest thing is, and the simplest thing, but also the most complex thing, is that the key to move through this is by turning inward. It is by going inward, going within. The answers you already have deep within you. It just takes honest self-investigation and willingness to acknowledge the blocks that might be getting in our way of gaining that clarity, gaining that sense of direction, knowing what to do next. And so it starts with the willingness of each person to go within, to turn inward. That's the movement that I'm hoping this book will create amongst quiet achievers, is that they have it all within themselves. They don't need someone else to truly direct and guide every aspect. In the past, we leaned on our parents for direction, for guidance, for approval. No, that's not the case anymore. It really comes down to us being quiet with ourselves, going within, and from there, discovering that authentic version of ourselves that wants to rise to the surface, that wants to be expressed, that wants to live that happy, peaceful, healthy life, and just embodying that version.
So beautifully said. It all starts within. You have to go within. You have to listen to yourself. And The Quiet Achiever is such a beautiful guide to help people to do that, to take the time to reflect. I'm someone who read it very quickly, but I plan to go back to actually do the work and pause and like take the moment to really understand some of the fears, some of the blocks, and really listen to my own intuition more deeply as well. So beautiful, beautiful. Okay, tell us, where can we find Quiet Achiever? Where can we connect with you if this message is resonating? Tell me everything.
Yes. Well, first of all, I just have to say thank you so much, Irina, for not only taking the time to read thoroughly through the book, but just asking such poignant questions. I feel like you brought forth details that even I didn't bring forth in my answers that will help whoever is listening, hopefully, to really resonate with the messages that are in this book. So thank you for that. I appreciate you taking the time and energy to do that. In terms of anyone who is interested in getting The Quiet Achiever, it is available basically anywhere where books are sold. I never knew I could be someone that could say that, but to be honest, it's true. You can go on Amazon. I mean, in the US, it's Barnes and Noble. In Canada, it's at Indigo. The big bookstores, I believe there are some independent shops that carry it as well, from what I learned from the publisher. I don't know who they are, I'll be honest, but if you just Google The Quiet Achiever by Linda Rayner, Quiet Achiever, Your Journey to Authentic Confidence, you'll find the book. In terms of me, now that the book is done, I will consistently post again on my YouTube channel, and it will be content related to helping quiet achievers to step into their confidence in their careers. And so communication type videos I'll be putting out, and confidence related topics as well. But it's really YouTube, or you get the book, or both.
Beautiful. I suggest both. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Linda, for making the time. I already can't wait to have you back for our next episode and our next chat. And I'm just so proud of you. I'm proud of you for listening inside of you to know how to guide your next direction. That sounds a lot easier than it is to actually do in reality. I know that personally. And for writing a truly incredible book. So thank you so much for being here and for writing this and having me along for the journey.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Irina, for all that you're doing to support me. And I can't wait to do the same when your book comes out.
Beautiful. Amazing.